All right, let's get started because I don't see anybody else wanting to hop in. So, hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Caitlin. I am the operations manager for the Alliance for Nonprofit Impact. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am also the program manager for 401Gives. Today, we will also be joined by Juniper from our donor relations team. I'll have them introduce themselves a little bit further on, but today we are going to be talking about analyzing your Giving Day dollars. Just as a small heads up, I am going to be going through the kind of the important columns of your Excel sheet that you're able to download off of your dashboard. And so if you're interested in following along with me and looking at your Excel sheet, you can take a minute and get that report now. If not, you'll have the slides in the recording after this anyways. Um, so before we move forward, again, just if you've been to any of our trainings, we always love to thank our 401 Give sponsors from the previous year. The matches and prizes are not accomplished without them. And so thank you to our 2025 sponsors. And then just a really quick agenda for today. First, we're going to be talking about downloading your report, looking at it, things to remember for next year. Then me and June are going to have a bit of a conversation about donor stewardship, what it means, things to do, challenges you face, and then finally we'll have some open Q&A for me and June. If you have questions along the way at any time, feel free to pop them in the chat, but especially as me and June are engaging about donor stewardship, feel free to ask any and all questions. Before we get started, just looking back on the year that we had with 401 Gives, it was a mega year. It was a year we've never had before. We know that we hit the 4.9, which is a dollar amount that we've never reached before, but it was also the first time that we were a million over year. And we also broke just every number there was to break, and that is not without the work of you all and the work that you do in your organizations and your nonprofits. We can put together a giving day, but if you all don't participate and talk to your audiences and engage with it on social media, it does not exist. And so that 4.9 is the work that you all do and the money that you all brought in. So thank you so much for that. Um, so just to kind of lay a base level, I'm going to quickly walk through the steps of how to download your report. So if you're on your dashboard, on the left-hand side, you're going to select the Reports tab and then Donations. And then you'll scroll all the way to the bottom of the page and you'll see a little piece that says Export CSV, and that report will be emailed to you. If you're an organization that has some sort of firewall in your email, there's a chance that it may get blocked. So you'll have to go in and allow list that. If you go onto kind of the FAQ page of whatever software you're working with, they should have some sort of informational material on how to do that. But if you're just struggling with it in general, you can ask me or someone on the team to help you. Important notes about this page. Anyone who is an admin on your account can access this report. Um, Also on this section is where you can find various steps related to your banking information. You can't necessarily change it here. There is an additional step, but it should show you how to do that and how to work through that, and then also how to add an administrator and a representative. And then again, if you need any help retrieving your report, you can email the 401 Gives team and we'll help you through that. So these next couple of slides, I'm going to be kind of going through each column that exists on the Excel sheet, and I'm going left to right as it exists there. This will be kind of a tedious kind of list conversation, but it's important because there's questions to ask for each column. So starting from left to right, if you are looking at your own Excel sheet or you will looking at your own Excel sheet, we're going to start off with your donation date and time. So you can see when your donors were most active. This will be, were they more active on 4:1 or 4:2, but also were they more active at 8 a.m. compared to 8 p.m. Depending on the audience that you serve, that's going to be a little bit different over time, but also it depends on your communication strategy. What was working well, what wasn't working well. Next to that, there's going to be a column for status. This will say either paid out or offline. Offline donations could be things that you uploaded. This could be donor advised funds. This could also be prizes and matches. You basically want to pay attention to what's paid out and what's offline and where is that offline money going to be coming from. If it's a prize or a match, it's paid out by United Way. Those checks should come out in the next few weeks. If it's a donor advised fund, where is it going to come from? Have you stewarded that donor the way that you're supposed to? Or is it paid out and you already have those funds? Any online dollars that were raised by GiveGab, the payouts happened, I believe, the week of April 8th. So you should have all of those funds. If you feel that there's a discrepancy or you don't have all those funds, you can email either the customer support team or myself, and we can walk you through that process. Next to it, you'll see intended amount, amount charged, and donor covered fees. This is going to be really integral when you're looking at how much money did come in versus how much money could have come in. There's no way that we can escape fees. Fees are everywhere, especially with credit cards as we do things online. But the software that we use with GiveGab allows donors to cover those fees. And so which donors did cover those fees, which didn't? Can you do more kind of a communication plan around asking your donors to cover those fees next time? But also, if you need to look at kind of the mathematical difference between the two, you can use the auto sum button on your Excel sheet. And so if you're looking at it at the top right-hand corner, you'll see a little button that says auto sum. You'll just want to click the bottom box that is at the bottom of your column that's empty, hit auto sum, and then it will sum everything that's on top. And then you can do the differences of the two. Next to that, you'll see first name, last name. Obviously, who are your donors? What are their names? You'll also see next to that a display name. This is important because it's going to thank the entire entity of that gift. And so we see a lot of times that husbands will go in and make gifts, but then the display name is a husband and a wife. You'll see partnership display names. Sometimes you'll also see a business display name. You'll see a child's display name. So even though somebody went in and made the gift, you want to thank the entire entity of the gift to make sure that all donors feel included in that. You'll then see your email and address. How can you contact these donors and how do you want to contact these donors? What capacity do you have to contact these donors? Does it have to be an email blast? Can you do direct mail? Can you do phone calls? You have to decide what's within your capacity and how you want to steward these donors. There will be a give again column. This is a new function that we've been using since last year. So it's the give a little more function. And this is for donors that log in to their GiveGap profile. So it's usually the donors who are giving it a higher amount. So this is important. And the give a little more function asks them to increase their gift from last year by 10%. So if you look through that give again column, you'll see either a yes or a no. If it's a yes, you'll want to know that they increased their gift from last year and they chose to do that intentionally. And then also go in and see their gift from last year. What was the difference? Was it more than 10%? Did they go up even farther? But also when you're doing your thank yous, you want to acknowledge that they intentionally raised their gift and they knew that they were doing that. Next to that will be anonymous. So this is a column that allows, there's a function on GiveGab that allows donors to be either anonymous to just the public or anonymous to the public and the organization. So you'll want to see if they were one or the other. And be aware of this if you're doing public thanking. There are some organizations that will post lists of their donors to say thank you in one shot, and this is good and people love that. But if you have people that were anonymous, make sure that you pay attention to that. If you have a donor that is anonymous to not only the public, but also you as well, know that we cannot release that information. I cannot give it to you no matter how large the gift, and I know that that can be frustrating sometimes, but I have to respect a donor's wishes, and hopefully they will not be anonymous next year. There is a column for new donor. This will show you if they self-selected as giving to your org for the first time. This year we had over 8,000 self-selected new donors, which was the largest number that we've had. Last year it was 6,000. Be aware that some people read questions differently. So in their mind, are they asking or saying that they're a new donor to you in general, or are they saying that they've never given to you on 401Gives? Either way, you want to steward new donors, but it may be a conversational point when you're going to talk to them. There's a column for reoccurring. So this is saying if a donor signed up to make a reoccurring gift to your org through the GiveGap platform. This is far and few in between. So if you do get a donor that has a reoccurring gift, make sure that you say thank you, make sure that you continue the conversation with them. Next to that will also be fundraiser. This is acknowledging if the gift came in by a peer-to-peer fundraiser and whose peer-to-peer fundraiser was it. That way you can not only thank the donor, but also your peer-to-peer fundraising champions. And then along with peer-to-peer fundraisers, Along with peer-to-peer fundraisers, you have your business fundraisers. So did someone who make a gift work at any of the businesses that had a business fundraiser on 401 Gives? Can you not only thank them, but then also thank the business as well for driving those donations to you? And then lastly, kind of the last chunk of your Excel sheet, there's a column for comments. So the donor can leave your organization a message that's not necessarily public. Maybe only you can see it, but can you reference this when you thank them? So, for example, with United Way, we got a couple of people just saying well wishes that they love United Way, they love our morals, they love what we do. And so we can go through and thank them that way using those notes that they give us. There's donation levels. Not all organizations use donation levels, and that's okay. But if you did select donation levels on your profile, this will let you know if a donor used one of those direct intentional paths. This is important to know if your donation levels are attainable. If you are using higher donation levels, maybe 100 and 500, and nobody's selecting them, but they're using those 25 and 50s, consider adjusting them for next year to get more of those quicker donors through the door. Referral sources. This is how did they find your URL? So was it through Facebook? Was it through a newscast website? Was it through LinkedIn? The important question to ask here is, are you already connecting there? So if you have 3 referrals from LinkedIn, but you didn't post on LinkedIn, look on how your URL was there in the first place. And then also see that you have some business to generate there. And so think about how you can use LinkedIn for not only just your next campaign, but just overall in general. The things that we're going through here in this Excel list, while they're kind of um, categorically related to 401 Gives, these are all things that you can think of when you're looking at your donor data in general. Um, the donation type, this is just what kind of donation came in. This could be an online, this could be offline donor advised fund, this could be offline prize and match. But the main question to ask here is, does this align with your audience? So if you're primarily serving older individuals and your donations are primarily from checks, but you see you have a bunch of online donors that came in using credit card and mobile pay, these may be people that you haven't reached before. And there's a new opportunity to steward that audience in a way that you have not before. Um, There is the in memory and in honor of. So was this gift made in memory and honor of somebody else? Most of the time you have in memories, not so much in honor of, but it's still sweet. It's still something to acknowledge, and it's a touch point for you to have with your donors. If they do leave an in honor of, you'll see the honoree's name and email. You can work with the donor to see if you should reach out, if this is an important touch point, but I think it's important in your thank you to those donors. Um, there's a lot of room for personalization when it comes to your GiveGap donation report. This doesn't mean that you have to go through and personalize every single thank you, depending on your capacity. If you're a larger org, you may have more people to do this. If you're a smaller org, you have less people to do this. But also know that you can draw out these thank yous over a certain amount of time. If you know that you want to get to a personal thank you first, do that and then do a segmented general thank you. But look through your donation report and see if there's maybe 1 to 5 personalized touch points that you can make that is within your capacity after your giving day. And I see that we have a question. Do you get notified if a donor's donation does not go through? No. Juniper's right. If it's an error in payment, the donor will get a kickback saying that it's been declined, essentially, and then they can work with their bank or us. We assist donors on 401 Gives as well to get those payments to go through. And then June said, however, get notified an offline gift DAF if they pledge it through 401 Gives.
So
Yes.
just that there are some things like a donor might make a DAF gift and they can enter that on 401 Gives, but nothing happens when they do that. That is them pledging, and they then have to go to we administer some DAFs at United Way, Rhode Island Foundation does as well. They would have to go to their institution and tell them to actually send you a check. So if you have those names, reach out to those donors and make sure that they are sending those checks.
Yes, absolutely. And the way that you can do that is by filtering your donation types. You can see offline and then donor advised funds. So those are kind of all the columns that are important in your Excel sheet. There are other ones that will be mostly blank or ones that are kind of uh, common sense, like address has your city, town, and zip code. But these are the ones that you want to poke through and really take at least kind of an hour to sort through and look through and ask these questions. So now that you have the report and you're looking at it and you're kind of combing through those columns, what are you supposed to do with them? So, first and foremost, thank your donors, thank your peer to peer fundraisers, send emails, personalize them if you can, send direct mail, share success on socials. You want to be shouting from the rooftops a thank you, but make sure that you say who you're thanking and why. We would love to believe that giving is altruistic, and sometimes it is, but also sometimes we do give to get thanks, and that's okay, especially right now. I think that it's no secret that 401 Gives was successful because of the current climate that we are dealing with in the nonprofit sector. And Rhode Islanders knew that this was a way to take back some of their power, and thanking them for that is going to be really important right now. Um, you also want to look back at previous year's reports. If you are an organization that has participated in 401 Gives, all of your year's dashboards are accessible all of the time. This means that you can go back and compare Excel sheets year over year. If you are not an organization that has worked with 401 Gives, it's still worth it to compare it with the data that you have in your databases, whether that's a formal CRM or Excel sheets that you keep in SharePoint. Look back at how 401 Gives compares to your recent donors and donations and think about why they may be different, why they may have changed, what room you have for improvements. Just think about the donors, the dollars, the types, the times, everything. And then it's really important to create a time to debrief with your team. Debriefs are so important. Please do not let 401 Gives happen and then you just don't talk about it until you realize registration is around the corner or that it's going to happen in 2 weeks and you want to register again. Please make time to debrief now so that you are better prepared. Involve the team that was doing the campaign this year. You can involve people who were involved in it last year that were maybe not involved in it this year, but also possible next year participants. So you can get people thinking in the room. You can also include your peer-to-peer fundraisers. You can include your board. Um, Make sure that you create an environment that allows everybody to talk. The more people that you have in the room, but the more minds that you have in that space as you're talking about community and crowdsource funding, the more ideas you will have. And also, it's just a good kind of data stewardship point to get reflections from everybody involved in the campaign. You want to debrief not only the data, but the experience. The data is really important. The data tells a story, but so does somebody's experience of the day. So, did you have somebody that was out with donors? Did you have somebody that was doing work in the field while the giving day was happening? Do you have a food pantry that was existing while 401 Gives was happening? Did you have an emergency come up that somebody had to go deal with? Talk about not only the data points that you can see on an Excel sheet, but also the experiences that happened for you, your donors, your volunteers, your board, everybody. This is more of a general debrief. This is how you can kind of pose some um, ideas. So you want to talk about your goals. Did you set goals? Should you set goals? I'm a firm believer in goals, but sometimes they don't work for every organization, and that's okay. But if you saw that your data was pointing to some sort of increased growth year after year, maybe you can make that a goal for next year and see if you can strategize around it. If you did set goals, did you meet them? Were they internal or external goals? I know that here we have, dollar and donor amounts that we put out that we want to reach as a giving day whole, but we also have a lot of internal goals, like how many prizes we want to get, how many trainings we want to do. It's important to be reflective of both. You want to look for your successes. So, what worked that you were planning on working, that you said, I want this to happen, and it did, but also what worked that you did not plan on working. What surprise successes came up and you said, oh, I wasn't planning on that happening, but it actually worked out really well. Or, oh, this donor actually came through and we didn't even ask them for funds. And how can you steward them forward next year? Um, you want to look for improvement areas as well. So, as much as we want to dwell on our successes, we have to think about the things that did not work as well. So what did not work that you were planning on working, that you maybe thought for sure was going to work, that you were maybe confident was going to work, but it just didn't work either at all or how you planned it to? And then were there unexpected challenges? Did things come up that you didn't see around the corner that you weren't expecting? Things that you didn't know about that you had to account for, and how can you account for them next year? Just some important notes on debriefing in general. Be sure to document everything that you do and document all factors of what you're talking about. So this even looks like, did someone leave? halfway through your campaign? Did you get a new CRM or software before or during 401 Gives? What was going on in the world this year? So when we talk about 401 Gives in the future here at United Way and at the Alliance, we are going to be sure to talk about the administration because I think that this 4.9 does not exist without this administration. And so, what were some things that maybe you can't quantify or qualify, but that you need to note for next year? Some of the things that we think about is even like, did somebody go on maternity leave? Did somebody take a week of vacation that was disruptive for you, especially smaller organizations? But no matter what, when you're doing your debrief, document everything. You want to write it down as if someone's going to be taking over next year and they need to be able to replicate what you did. Like when a teacher leaves notes for a substitute, you want to be able to look at that next year as if you had no knowledge and be able to recreate everything over again. So, what to debrief on the data side? Um, In your GiveGab report, you want to talk about donors, peer to peer fundraisers, matches, and prizes. Again, each column that you look at has a question that can be asked of it. And maybe there is no answer, or maybe there's no deep answer, but there is still something to think about there. And then put this information into your databases. So if you use a CRM or an association management system, you want these contacts to go in there. If you use email marketing, you want these people to be in your audiences. It's not good stewardship to have these people interact with you for one day and then never talk to them again, besides a thank you. A thank you is important, but a thank you is not enough. You need to continue to talk to them. You want to look at your various engagement pieces. So these look like social media, newsletters, text messaging, direct mail. Remember to compare year over year, and you can go back as far as you think is applicable for what you're looking at. And then was all content put out content that you made, or did you get any earned media? And earned media is media that's picked up by others that you did not pay for. This could be news outlets, this could be influencers, this could even be other organizations that are partnering with you on something, or they picked up your story, they posted you to their Instagram story, whatever you define as earned media. Um, but what can you do to continue that earned media, those relationships for next year? And then, really quickly, I'm just going to go through some best practices for next year. If any of you were on our call earlier this week about leveling up your 401 Gives Giving Day, you heard these points already. But after you've kind of gone through and debriefed and analyzed your dollars, these are some best practices for next year when you're thinking ahead, because debriefing is also thinking ahead. You want to register as early as possible. Registration for 401 Gives opens in November every year. This is when we are most accessible as a team to help you. This is when customer success is most accessible as a team to help you. And it is often the lowest prices. The earliest you register, that moment in time will be the cheapest it will be up until registration closes. Last year for November, we did Nonprofit Appreciation Month, and registration was $4.01. Cumulatively, we had 665 organizations register in total. 115 of them took advantage of that $4.01 registration in November. So make sure that you register early. And I do believe that we're doing that $4.01 again for Nonprofit Appreciation Month. So keep that in mind. Establish roles amongst staff and volunteers early and establish backup and supports for those roles. So when you're thinking about who to involve in that debrief, involve those team members that either came in as backup, that you can select as backup for next year, that you want in that space. But we see a lot of turnover sometimes in the spring, and I end up getting a lot of emails that says so and so left, or so and so is on a break, or so and so is on maternity leave. And while these aren't things that you can exactly predict for, you can establish kind of backup roles just in place, just in case. You want to decide on your campaigning for the upcoming 401 Give season. This looks like, are you making a specific ask? Can you tie it into something you already have going on? Are you just going to keep it general? Um, I'm always a big proponent of making a specific ask for 401 Gives. I think it's important for donors to be able to choose different projects and programs, but also having empathy is sometimes really hard. And so people get fatigued, they get compassion fatigue. And so if they can look for specific projects and programs that they can give to, it's going to make their time on the giving day a lot easier, and you may see more dollars come in. Um, 401 Gives is also not a separate ask that has to happen. If you are running an event or a campaign, a capital campaign, if you're doing your spring appeal at that time, you can tie 401 Gives into it as just another avenue to give through. It doesn't have to be a separate ask necessarily. You want to identify peer to peer fundraisers early and educate them and introduce them to the platform. Depending on who you're engaging as your peer to peer fundraisers, sometimes it takes people a little bit longer to get situated to technology, and that's okay. And if you work with them early enough, that will be easy for both you and your peer to peer fundraisers. You'll also want to have them watch the 401 Gives peer to peer training. And again, the earlier that you do this, the more access that you have to the team, so you can be better prepared for those kinds of things. Identify possible private match opportunities. Yearly large donors, flexible grant or foundation money, board collection opportunity. These are all ways that you can get matching money so you can use it privately on your profile. When we think of matching money, we think of $20,000, $50,000, $100,000. And while that would be great, if you can find a way to pull that, that is fantastic. But sometimes it just takes $500 of matching money to get donors in the door to be able to double their impact. It does not have to be a large amount. You also want to create a communication plan. So, when are you posting? What are you posting? How much of that can be scheduled in advance if you have the capacity, or not even scheduled, but just created in advance? I'm going to put a link in the chat right now. We have, as part of our nonprofit toolkit, a communication guide for your day of giving. And so this is a, I believe, 13-week plan that outlines what you should be doing it, when you should be doing it, and a space for you to fill those thoughts in. I recommend that you take a look at it or create your own communication plan. When you know what you're doing in advance, you can account for possibilities. You can strategize a little bit deeper because you already have a base layer versus being kind of a week out and realizing that you haven't posted about it, you haven't talked about it, and so you need to be able to talk to your donors sooner and often. When we also think about posting, we talked about this a little bit in our social media and how to tell your story panel. But when 401 Gives comes around and 401 Gives is coming up, every single one of your posts does not have to be 401 Gives. You should be looking to engage followers for a long period of time. So, again, incorporating 401 Gives into your storytelling is important, but it doesn't have to be its own separate thing. 401 Gives is an opportunity for you to get new donors and different kinds of donors and steward them into the other things that you do. So that looks like volunteerism, it looks like Instagram, it looks like LinkedIn. You want to engage them in your mission and the things that you're doing. And then you can also work with partner organizations. There is no rule in the book that says that you have to do 401 Gives by yourself. You have to register your own organization and you have to have your own profile to say you get the funds that you need. But you can do this as a group project with other people, and that's okay. We had a collection of organizations that were mainly focused in the environmental sector. I think it was about 12 of them that worked together on 401 Gives this year. They understood that a lot of their work is done in tandem with each other. So they put out thank yous that thanked each other. They put out pictures with each other. They did collaborative posts on Instagram. And it was nice to share space and ask questions of each other instead of doing it in your own little bubble and feeling really stressed. And then, just really quickly, we have two statistics from 2025 about peer to peer fundraising and matches and challenges. So, when you're thinking about peer to peer fundraising, it is vital and it is the backbone of 401 Gives and the organizations that do well. Organizations raised an average of $16,000, almost 17, when they had peer-to-peer fundraisers. When they did not, they only raised about 3,500. 3,500 is not a small number, and those are important dollars. Any dollars that come in are important, but we're seeing a $13,000 difference between those who have peer-to-peer fundraisers and those who don't. If you get a head start on peer-to-peer fundraising, how much more successful can you be? When we also look at matches and challenges, an average was raised of 29,000, almost 30,000 when organizations had matches and challenges. These are private matches and challenges. And when they did not, they on average raised about 4.2K. Again, not a small number by any means, but a huge difference of almost $16,000. Now, these numbers will be a little bit skewed because when we look at matches and challenges in privatized orgs, we see a difference of $100,000 to 500, but no matter what, there's going to be a difference there. And so really quickly, I'm going to turn it over to June to introduce themselves. Me and June are going to have a conversation now about donor stewardship, and I'm going to ask them a few questions. So, just a reminder, if anybody has any questions for June specifically, for myself around donor stewardship, you can put them in the chat and we'll get to them as they come up. But I will give June the floor to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juno Perdero. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a philanthropy officer here at the United Way of Rhode Island. So my job is a little complicated. I do manage some of our donor advised funds, so they're on the top of my head. I also work with major donors, and I manage our Emerging Leaders program, which is for donors that are in the early to mid-career professional space. So I do a lot of programming with them to think about what their goals are for their career and their philanthropy and how to reach those goals. Uh, Last thought before that, before I worked for United Way, I worked for Rivers Edge Arts, one of our grantee partners, and I'm intimately familiar with 401 Gives on sort of both sides, as it were. So excited to be here to help.
Thank you so much, June. I think that when we talk about donor stewardship, we all kind of know what it is, but to hear about it from both of your perspectives of a participating org and now kind of a little bit in a different space, but also just what it means to you as a fundraiser. So that's where I'm going to start. It's a little bit of a holistic question, but
Sure.
what does donor stewardship mean to you and look like for you?
So donor stewardship is the process of building a relationship with a donor so that you can guide them toward making more and larger gifts. Uh, as you put it, we don't want to just talk to them once a year and say bye-bye. We know that most organizations see actually a lot of turnover year over year. Well, in Rhode Island, I think it's a little bit different in that most of the organizations that I've worked with have seen a pretty high rates of donor retention. But 401 Gives can really be the outlier where we get those one-off gifts and then never hear from them again. So stewardship for us really is going to look like, how do you call them in? How do you get to know those people? And I do recommend literally calling them. uh, we love to send out the thank yous, and those are so important, especially the sooner that you can get out your thank you messages, letters, cards, whatever it is that you can send. Great. But there is something really powerful about making that phone call, especially if it's to a donor that you have never seen or heard of before, and saying, "Hey, I just wanted to know how you got to know about us." And then you have an opportunity to talk to them a little bit more about your work and start building that sense of trust and familiarity with them.
Yeah, we saw through the nonprofit sector survey that most organizations have less than 50 donors in their kind of their index. And most of those are the same donors over and over again, which is great for
Yeah.
reliability. But how do we have orgs break out of that 50 and go up to 100, 150, the amount of donors they're getting on 401 Gives? Um, and through 401 Gives, we see a lot of different donors come through in age demographic wise. I think that we strategically put out incentives that allow both older donors and younger donors to come through. And so when you're thinking about donor stewardship, how do you differentiate between your donor segments? This could look like a new donor versus a recurring, maybe an older donor versus a younger. What does that process look like for you?
Uh, Segmentation is always something that's really challenging. And part of it is going to depend on how you choose to segment folks. It's also a question of like, especially for small organizations, segmentation always isn't the most helpful strategy. If you
Mm.
have 50 donors, there's only so many ways that you're going to break that group apart. And it might not be the best use of your time for a small staff. If you're thinking about other ways of looking at this, um, one is uh, thinking about what interests you know those donors have. So if you've just gotten a new list of donors through 401 Gives, step one, still absolutely call them, get to know them, how they found out about you to begin with, which will tell you a lot about their communication preferences, and also what really interests them about your work. If you are an after-school arts program, for instance, maybe you want to invite them to come and see some of the artwork and have those kinds of engagements. And when you think about your events, you really target that list. people who are interested in the arts. But maybe some of those people are not really that interested in artistic expression or social emotional learning. They're more interested in the relationship that your programming has to educational outcomes. And so those are the folks that you want to have as a separate segment that you can really send things like what your collection of data on academic outcomes looks like. Um, Maybe you want to invite some of the largest donors in that group to come to the Rhode Island After School Network event with you, um, so that you can find those other opportunities to uh, demonstrate your impact in a way that's going to be resonant with them to continue to build a sense of trust and familiarity. Uh, Segmenting by age is something that I think a lot of people are really interested in because we know that the younger generations that have access to funds at this point, millennials and Gen Z, tend to give less than older generations have. It can be really tricky to figure out what that looks like. Um, we know that best practices for them are going to talk about a difference in communication style more than they are really any other ways that we think about like segmentation. Um, we can think a lot more about like what that can look like if that's a conversation that folks want to have, especially if you have sort of any more specific information that you're willing to share about your programs. Um, but the key here is going to be thinking about who your audience is with any of your digital communications. Uh, Younger folks are not reading your Facebook posts. They are on Instagram and or TikTok, although that's really nebulous these days with everything that's gone on since the beginning of this year. Um, they're almost certainly not going to read your email blasts, which is not to say that email blasts aren't important, that we don't see the subject line come across our phones, and that doesn't help us stay top of mind or help you stay top of mind in those donors' brain.
I do love that you were hitting it with an us because we are still in that us.
Yeah, we are.
um, but you did mention a little bit of engaging donors in kind of that data way of what drew you to us and how can I report back to you. And so, how do you report back to your donors on the impact of their gifts? Um, and just what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So there's a few things to keep in mind that are best practices. It's always going to vary a little depending on what the nature of your work is and what kind of mission you're fulfilling. Um, but the key thing to remember, well, two critical items here. One, you want to be thanking and demonstrating impact to donors using the same language that you use to make the ask. So
Mhm.
if you have a specific project for 401Gives, for example, and you wanted to say, open a food pantry as part of your after school program. I've decided that we're building this organization now. So it's my metaphor. Um, is so if that's what you're doing and that's what the ask was centered around, then you really want to come back to them with language that re- refre- refers to that and gives them impact related to that particular project, right? Maybe this is the number of youth that have had access to it, or this is something that I heard from one of those youth as they were getting the resources that they need, or this is the feedback that I've gotten from the kids. Something to that effect. Making sure that the thing that you are demonstrating impact with, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, and I recommend both, is connected to the language that they were presented with so that they know that they are paying for what they thought they were paying for, not for something else. Not that your other needs aren't important, but when we're building that relationship of trust with donors, we want them to feel like there's this level of transparency.
Yeah.
The the other thing to think about is donor centricity, which we talk a lot about, and then it's really easy to forget to do it because we're really in the trenches of our own work, and we know how important it is, and we know how revolutionary it is that we're doing these things, and so we tend to talk in the first person, right? You know, we launched this new thing. We did this for our kids. And that really alienates the donor in a lot of ways because they don't feel like they're really involved. So often it's really powerful to just be humbler than you ought to be. I know how amazing you are. You know how amazing you are, and we're going to downplay that a little for the donor, and start writing in the second person. I don't think that a thank you or a solicitation should ever go out that doesn't have the word you in the first paragraph. Before you ever make a hard return, you need to use that second person pronoun you for the donor. You did this. You can save this, et cetera, et cetera, to really put them in the driver's seat and so that they can think about their giving as something that they are doing to make a change, because that's what really gets people amped up to, write that check.
Yeah, I think it's a similar sentiment of when I talk about 401 Gives and I'm saying, this does not exist without the work that you all do on this call. We are often a part of something much larger, and we need to incorporate everybody that is a part of that story. I also know that whenever I get an email and it says, you are invited to this, I'm like, me? You want me to come? You want me to help with your campaign? Okay, I'll do it. Um, and so we've talked a lot about all the things that you're good at, and June is very good at their job. If you ever got the chance to have a conversation with them, watch them do their work, they are a lovely person to be around. But what are some of the bigger challenges that you've had to face with donor stewardship, either in this position, your previous, or both?
It's always time. It is always time. There are so many demands that are put on all of us in nonprofits, and it's hard to block out the time to do this in the way that we would want. As I was mentioning earlier, segmentation is not always the best strategy, especially if you have a very small number of donors. It doesn't make sense often to put them into buckets when there are other things that you can be doing with your time. You can be making more phone calls to donors and getting to know them, which is always a good use of your time. But especially if you're a small organization and development is not your full-time role, as for me, before I was at United Way, I had to wear many, many, many hats. And calling donors on the phone and listening to them was not something that I had time for a lot of the time. There are lunches to be picked up for the kids in the programs. There are spreadsheets to be filled out. There are grants to be submitted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is always going to be a challenge. So it's a question of thinking about what you can do, what you can prioritize, what you can delegate, which can also be hard. Um, and really trying to think about what the most meaningful touch points are going to be for your donors. Maybe you do one less of your newsletters. Maybe your newsletter becomes less frequent and you have more time that you can actually spend on the phone or having coffee with your donors. Maybe you think about how um, is take some more time to look at your 401 Gives report and find out where your donors live. Um, it's pretty easy in Rhode Island to guesstimate relative incomes based on those zip codes and think, if I can only contact 10 of these 50 new donors, which ones are most likely to become my major donors? Where do they live? And maybe I can prioritize blocking out the time for that.
I think that's a really important perspective in terms of time, and seeing what is achievable and what is going to give you kind of the best payout in that area. Um, I do have a final question for you, June, but really quickly, I wanted to remind people that if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If we don't see any questions roll in, we may end a little bit early, which is fine because that means that we gave them all the information that they need. And then I am also going to put a link in the chat for a post 401 Give survey. This is a space for you all to just share your thoughts about your experience with the Giving Day. We use the survey feedback results to make improvements year over year because nothing about us without us. This does not exist without you all. And so we want to make the improvements that are worth your time in the future. Um, and so, as we talked about, organizations most often have about 50 or fewer donors. And we often see with small organizations that have small staff, nobody wants to be the fundraiser. It's kind of that Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other saying, you do the ask, you do the ask, I don't want to do the ask, or nobody's kind of this designated fundraiser. And some people are born fundraisers, and that's okay. But how did you get comfortable making the ask? And again, if you ever get to watch June work, they will ask for anything, and it's amazing. But how did you get into that space?
So it's To be honest, it's a psychological trick to just sit with yourself and say, "This isn't for me." I'm a very anxious person, and so if I am the person at the restaurant who has like received a dirty spoon, I'm gonna drink my soup or I'm gonna starve to death at this table. I am not asking for a new one. But if you, Katie, need a new spoon, I will go to a manager if that is what I have to do. And that's really who we have to be for our organizations, because what the work that we're doing is for the community. And that's how I think about this. I will ask anybody for absolutely anything if I think that that's what's going to make a difference for the communities that we serve. Um, and I think that that's really grounding when you are going into a meeting and you're going to make an ask, especially a large ask. It can be really daunting, uh, and you definitely have all of the bodily responses. You feel your heart rate pick up, and it's important, I think, to sit there for a moment, take some deep breaths, and say to yourself, this isn't really for me or about me. This is about my community. And I know that I can go in there and I can make an ask for them. And I find that that alleviates a lot of the challenge. Also, preparedness, 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 right? We always want to do a lot of research in our donors and have a strong sense before we make and ask about what their capacity is, what their affinity to our work is like, what their inclination is overall. So you generally have a good sense of how likely it is that you're going to get a yes before you go in, at least ideally. Again, we come back to those constraints of time. And ultimately, the worst that can really happen is that you get a no. But if you don't ask people for money, you will never get it.
Yeah. When I was first joining 401 Gives, and I had to solicit, sponsorship money, I'm making kind of these large asks. One of the things that I was told is that the worst they can do is say no, but the best thing they can do is say yes, and you'll never get that yes if you don't ask. And if they do say no, chances are the next time they're pretty close to a yes, they may think of you first, and that's important. And so that ask continues even when you're not there. But I love the framework around kind of removing yourself because I think that we do this work for not ourselves anyways, and so our ask should be outside of ourselves as well. So I
Yeah.
think that's a really great sentiment to end on, June. Thank you so much for being here. We do have a
Oh,
question. Thank you for your donor stewardship tips. Do you know if United Way has sent out the matching prize money? No, not yet. Those checks should be sent out by the next like 2 weeks or so. You should receive them in the next 2 weeks, so very shortly. And I will give the awkward 3-second pause where we just make eye contact over the camera until we see that there's no questions.
I like fun fact, it takes 8 seconds, studies have shown, for students to realize a question is not rhetorical and begin to formulate answers. So when I was teaching, I loved to give them 8 seconds, and I tell them they have 8 seconds to start asking questions before I move on.
Okay, so we'll do an 8-second pause now, starting now. Timer's up.
Thanks, Lisa.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, June, for being here. As always, reach out to us, the team, if you have any questions, curiosities, or concerns. Tomorrow, we have a training on the Give for Good platform. You're welcome to join, and we hope to see you all there. But thank you so much. Bye, everybody.